You know, one morning as I was feeding the horses in the main barn at the training facility where I worked, one of the workers came in, and you got to understand this morning it was about 20 degrees. None of us were talking. None of us was very lively because we were just trying to get our blood flowing as we went about our daily business. And he come in the main barn and he said these words, and I'll never forget them. The horse fell into the hole. Blew my mind. Upon further investigation, I noticed he took me out to the pasture where we keep these brood mares and baby horses. And this baby horse, his head was sticking out of a hole that was about that big around. And by virtue of the fact that it was so cold, you could see the steam coming up out of the hole. Sometime during the night, his back feet had hit that and he fell in rear end first. Turns out this was a septic tank and we did not know it was there. Well, we had to get a backhoe because this horse on a day that's 20 degrees is standing up to his neck in water. It was below the frost line, so this water was very, very cold but not froze. The backhoe driver was so worried about hurting this horse as he was being dug out that he wasn't getting the job done. The owner of the facility said, "Dig this horse out. I don't care if it kills him. He's no good where he is." You know, sometimes we find ourselves in situations like that. We have to change our situation, change our place, change, period, whether or not it kills us because we're no good where we are. This is a great illustration. I carried this illustration around for years. Many times we have sermons looking for good illustrations. I was confident I had a good illustration. I just needed a sermon to put with it. And then reading the book of 2 Kings, I found one. And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate. And they said one to another, "Why sit we here until we die? If we say we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we die also. Now therefore come, let us fall upon the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die." 2 Kings 7, 3 and 4. You know, these leprous men come to a realization. They're going to die if they don't do something. Sometimes we need to have this mindset. And it is with this in mind we are going to notice the mindset of these 4 leprous men from the vantage point of their dilemma, their duty, and their decision. Let's look at their dilemma. Their dilemma was they were reliant upon charity for food. And there was none, food nor charity. There was none to be had. By virtue of the fact that they were lepers, they had to live outside the city and they had to be separate. Anything they touched would become unclean. If you touched what they touched, you would become unclean. If they come into your whole house would become unclean and you would be unclean. They couldn't make things in order to sell to people who were clean because whoever bought it would be unclean. They were dependent upon someone else for their sustenance. The crux of their dilemma was their dependence upon the city for food, but the city was dependent upon God. Now, according to the king of this city, this evil is of the Lord, 2 Kings 6:33. Of course, this evil is this punishment. And this is further illustrated by the fact that he was wearing sackcloth. 2 Kings 6:30. Not only was he wearing sackcloth, on further reading we know that he was wearing sackcloth under his clothes. As a reminder, every time he moved, this sackcloth would scratch his skin and he would be reminded of the punishment of the Lord. Now, whether by the hand of the Lord or just by the king of Syria wanting to conquer this city was besieged. 2 Kings 6:24. You know, acts of war are terrible. But sometimes those acts that are committed by people going through a siege just trying to survive, they're worse than the acts of war that are being done unto them. The people of the city were so bad off that they were eating babies. 2 women had covenanted with one another. We'll eat your baby today, and tomorrow we'll eat mine. 2 Kings 6, 26 through 29. These people were bad off. If these people were so bad off, think about how bad off a group of people would be that was depending upon them. There was no food to be had. The city had dried up. And because of this, there was no food to be given to the lepers. In essence, these lepers relied upon the city relied upon God, and God had cut everyone off. But these lepers still had a duty. They had the same duty as every man. You know, a universally accepted idea, whether one believes in evolution or one believes in creation, is that all living things has a responsibility to live and further their species. Survival of mankind was the first commandment given by God, Genesis 1:28. People with no religious affiliation whatsoever go to great lengths to follow that command. Mankind has another duty. It's spiritual in nature, not physical. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. This simple statement is from the wise Solomon. It carries with it some implication. To fear God and keep His commandments is to live spiritually. Many, whether they claim a fear of God or a disdain of God, are not following this command. It is man's duty to live, and that both spiritually and physically. These lepers found themselves in a position of carnal destitution. They asked themselves, "Why sit we here until we die?" And they were faced with the answer, because we are not doing anything about our situation. They were faced with the decision to accept their fate, or at least be found doing something in order to change, even if it is wrong. Their decision, they decided to change despite the fact that changing might not help. Sometimes on this earth, one needs to change, even if that change isn't necessarily for the better. These lepers came to the conclusion that they must do something, and this was a very logical conclusion. If we go into the city, we will die. We will die of starvation, because there's the famine in the city brought on by the siege. If we sit here where we are, we will die. If we cast ourselves upon the mercy of the Syrians, we could die. But that means we might also live. But if we die, we're no better or no worse off than what we are now. You know, training animals is merely behavioral modification. I was a horse trainer for around 10 years and achieved some recognition among men for such, to the point that I would be asked for advice. Many times people came seeking advice, but those people would fight tooth and nail to hang on to their old way of doing things. They would fight tooth and nail to hang on to their old methods that messed their horse up in the first place. And I would tell these people, without exception, the same thing. If I'm trying to chop down a tree with a fork, at some point I at least go back to that drawer and get a butter knife. What I mean by that is I'll eventually work myself around to the tool shed and get a saw. We have to change, and we change till we find something that works. The reason one can make money as a horse trainer is because people tend not to listen to that advice. You know, spiritually, man is like these lepers. Mankind is sitting at the gate, the entrance point of the kingdom of heaven. These lepers did wrong by going to the enemy of God. There's no doubt about that. Please do not be too hard on them. They were derelict, destitute, dying, and desperate. They had no guidebook. Mankind is in the same situation spiritually. It is a sad state of affairs, but even those of us in the church, like those in the city, are starving spiritually from a famine. Some members of the Lord's church are no better off in the church than they would be if they were outside. Those that are in the church will not do anything to study, to change, to evangelize, or otherwise serve God, and are dying as surely as someone is dying who has never known God. It does not have to be so. We have the keys to the kingdom. We have access to the bread of life and the living water. Please, if you find yourself in the dilemma of spiritual starvation, understand it is your duty to live. Make the decision to change for the purpose of coming to God. So the question stands, my brethren, why stand we here and die? Thank you.